Okay, so I was interrupted when I was discussing the state variables, and you can see that if you look at the state variable detail table, you can see that some of the projects with high level of staff experience failed, and also some projects that had middle and high process maturity failed. And you can see that projects that involve both large and small staffs failed. And so, really, the authors have came to the conclusion in a systematic manner that there wasn't any correlation between success and failure based on the state variables. So if we go to slide 39, this is a full table detail for the low-level control variables, and you can see that the number of assets and projects that succeeded were large and small. Some projects failed that had a reward policy. Projects that succeeded had qualification or testing of assets before they were used, and some did not. Also, projects that failed had development of assets just in time, and some were in advance. Some that succeeded had an independent team, and some did not. Some projects that were successful had assets developed from scratch, and some were re-engineered, and one had an asset that was used as is. And some projects that succeeded reused requirements and design and code. So the authors didn't find any correlation between the low-level control variables and project success. Slide 40. Okay, so here we're going to talk about some common scenarios for failure. This is why the authors felt that some projects failed. And so this represents case D, E, F, I, J, and Y. And these were failed due to a belief that installing a repository and or use of object-oriented design automatically results in successful reuse. And the authors came to the conclusion that this is not the case. Scenario 2, case O and T, failed due to an inability to effect change in the processes and design models used by their main contractor and other subcontractors. So you had a situation where you had a subcontractor who was implementing reuse, and all the people around them were doing their own thing. And together these folks were trying to develop one massive product, and they weren't able to get on the same page and reuse across this large organization, which actually was parts of different companies. Okay, so slide 41, Project X. This was basically just data that was thrown out because this company had gone out of business, had been reorganized, been bought and sold, and this was a data variable that they felt that this company wouldn't have been able to do anything successfully because of so much worker turnover. Okay, so slide 42. So this is where we're going to talk about the pattern to success and low-level control variables. And the authors felt that there were two manners in which the low-level control variables were used together, two patterns to success. And these were a pragmatic approach in which no independent reuse team was used, and they were developing assets just in time, mostly through re-engineering. Or the other approach was a sophisticated approach where there was a dedicated independent reuse team that develops reusable assets from scratch with a tight approach. And the authors felt that both of these can be successful, and the reason to pick one or the other is based on the size of the company and the degree of management commitment, meaning that if you only have 5 development guys, you can't have 3 of them working full-time in reuse. That's just not going to work. Okay, slide 43. This is the steps or some of the decisions that need to be made when you're going to do reuse. And first, you need to understand how much value is there in reuse. How frequently can assets be reused? And you do that with a domain analysis. And then you also need to once you decide you want to do reuse, you need to get commitment of top management for the following: to change non-reuse specific processes, add reuse specific processes, address human factors, set up a repository, and assign key reuse roles. Okay, so slide 44. Why is it important to modify non-reuse specific processes, and what's important to have within those non-reuse specific processes. Well, first off, you have to have ownership of those processes within your organization, and you have to change those processes to address availability of assets. And you need to also change your requirement definition analysis process, your high-level design, your testing, and your scheduling and your costing. So slide 45. To add reuse-specific processes, you need to identify reusable assets with domain analysis. You have to be able to address large and small assets, and you have to understand or decide if assets are going to be produced in advance, if they're going to develop from scratch, and who's going to own or manage the assets. Okay, you also, very important, as we discussed, slide 46, to address human factors. The authors also felt that it's important to set up a repository, and that it can be a reuse-specific tool, or it can be an add-on to some other change management tool that already exists. Okay, so slide 48. This is what factors are important to success. You need to consider available resources and size of company to choose a sustainable approach to reuse. You need to minimize change, retain existing development approach, and fit the reuse to your existing approach. And you should initially focus on processes and roles, and technology and supporting tools can be changed later, and your changes must be affordable. Slide 49. This is some of the experiences with reuse that the authors mentioned with other companies out in industry. And Hewlett-Packard was one of the earliest adopters of reuse, and their observations indicated that objects and complex technology are not required, that technology is the most critical success factor. Reuse is a business issue, and it involves technology transition and organizational change. Again, that supports human factors. And that key success factors are instituting a reuse culture, again, human factors, providing training, adhering to a standard, and securing management commitment. So what the authors found is actually supported by folks operating in the U.S. Doing software development with reuse. Okay, so another slide 50. Another observation from companies, one of them was Motorola, learned of the challenges of introducing reuse in a multinational organization. And really what they're saying there is that you have to have the same processes being used across the organization, whether they're multinational or there's contractors, and that you need to have the ability within the organization to implement the processes that they need to use. So slide 51. Card stated the most important obstacle to reuse are economic and cultural. And Fishman noted that there's a misconception that object orientation equals reuse, and that often results in failure. And that's exactly what the authors found. Okay, so what were the conclusions? Slide 52. The authors found that large and small companies working in a variety of domains can be successful reuse, and that even companies with a high commonality between applications and mature processes and strong process maturity that use object-oriented approaches can still fail, and they failed as high as 33%. And the failures were the result of not introducing reuse processes, not modifying non-reuse processes, and not taking into account human factors. And contributing to the failure was a lack of commitment from top management, of not being aware of the importance of human factors, and believing that object-oriented techniques or the use of a repository will equal success. Okay, so slide 53. Success depends on the commitment by management. The approach must include initiating reuse processes, modifying non-reuse processes, and human factors. And you must customize the approach to the context of the